Hello and welcome to Yesterday's Coffee, the podcast where we chat about fitness, nutrition, and business all over coffee that may or may not have been brewed yesterday. Today, we are covering the ideal diet for a busy schedule. I'm sure you've had this come up plenty of times because everybody is so busy and there's so little time for working on fitness, nutrition, or anything else.
Oh, I get this all the time. I would say that a lot of my clients put themselves in the category of being too busy to worry about any of this, which, you do have to prioritize and make some commitments if you have health-related goals. That doesn't mean that everybody who's busy needs to be on a, fat loss diet. But if you decide that that's what your goal is, we got to prioritize some things and we have to work a little bit smarter. So we came up with some tips that might be helpful for those people.
Yes. And so we'll cover kind of like the underlying parts of a diet that you're trying to accomplish and how to go about that the easiest way and the most time effective way. And then we'll also touch on a few things and a few dieting strategies that are probably less appropriate if you're really trying to save time.
Yes. And lose fat.
Yeah.
Which, again, you do have to remember always, it's always a choice between your time and your money. Unfortunately, we can't have it all. We can't have, a huge variety of different foods and meals pre-prepared for us at a super, super low price.
Right.
That doesn't really happen.
Right.
So a lot of the things that we're talking about today might come with a higher price tag, but that's kind of the choice that you need to make.
Yeah. I mean, if a body composition goal, whether that's weight loss, building muscle, improving performance, is a priority for you, you need to balance out the amount of time you want to put into it, the amount of variety in the food that you want to consume, and the amount of money you want to invest into it. Obviously, if you want to, and you can't put them all in like the upper category.
You can't rank them all number one important.
Right. So you can't have, like Alexa was saying, you can't have ready-made meals sent to you and just not expect to pay money for that. Or at the same time, you can't expect to prepare all of your meals and want to save a bunch of money and save a bunch of time, but still have all this variety. Like there's a couple different things that you need to see here. What is going to make the most sense for you. And it doesn't always have to stay the same. Like if for whatever reason you've got a crazy week coming up and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to bite the bullet and spend the money and have someone prep it for me. Great. It doesn't have to be an every week type of thing. But there is checks and balances here. So we'll go through each of those.
When you have some sort of goal in mind, or when you decide to approach a certain goal, and it's not, always health-related goals, whatever goal that you want to accomplish, you have to sit down ahead of time and map out what you're willing to put into that goal. Planning. You can't just say, oh, I want to be 30 pounds lighter and not have any concept of what it's going to take to get there. You really have to think about these goals and think through what you're willing to budget in terms of money, time, preparation, all of those different things.
Yeah, exactly. So in most cases, more often than not, someone that's coming to work with either of us that's very busy, they tend to have a weight loss goal. And so with a weight loss goal, no matter who we're working with, no matter what their goal is, what their experience is, the number one priority is a caloric deficit.
Yes.
Like that is the only way we're going to achieve weight loss. So that has to be priority number one. And so one of the things that you can utilize right out of the gate that's going to help us save time and save calories is intermittent fasting. And so
easiest way to cut calories is cut out a meal.
What a great way to do this. You've got less meals to eat or less time in the day to eat them. And that in and of itself is very highly likely to remove calories. Because if you're somebody that's normally eating through 16 hours of the day because you're getting your recommended 8 hours of sleep, like I know you all are, then if you cut that down to 12 hours or even 8 hours, then you're cutting your feeding window in half. It's going to be much more difficult, not to say that it's impossible, but much more difficult to eat as many calories as you were before without even looking at your food.
Absolutely. Well, and so you're saving time by cutting out that meal. So you're saving time eating, but then you're also saving yourself time in terms of planning or preparing, cooking, if you happen to be doing those things too.
Exactly.
So you're saving yourself a lot of time just by pulling back on, a meal or restricting your eating window.
Yeah. And so the opposite side of that would be a diet where you're forced to eat 6 or more meals per day at very regular feeding intervals. So that would be like a very standard bodybuilding style diet where you're eating every 2 to 3 hours. And there's nothing wrong with that. Plenty of people do incredibly well with that. There's a reason why a lot of competitors use it to get super, super lean. But when we're talking about the ideal diet for a busy schedule, having to prep out that many meals and then be forced to eat that frequently, especially in most professional settings, a lot of people don't have that luxury to be able to just go out and eat 6 meals throughout the day, 8 meals throughout the day.
Well, and I would honestly say too that when we're thinking about these people who are very, very busy, these people are probably also under more stress and potentially not sleeping as much as they should.
We know that's the case.
They're not recovering as well as they should. And so honestly, from like an internal standpoint, eating these meals more frequently, eating 6 to 8 meals in a day is actually way more taxing on the body. So it is probably not appropriate for a lot of those people who are overly stressed and overly busy.
Right.
I find clients who try to approach things that way for a fat loss program end up feeling really bloated and really gross all the time just because their body really isn't able to work its way through those, short, or I guess closer together meals. Frequent meals.
Well, and that's just another layer of stress to add in, right? If you've got all of these meals that you've got to get through, and especially if they're not terribly satisfying. Yeah. Like if they're broken up so small that it's like, I just kind of ate a little something. I wish I could have eaten more, but I got to wait another 2 hours before I can keep eating it.
Yeah, that approach is really just not my thing.
Yeah. No,
not for myself, not really for my clients.
Yeah.
We want to be satisfied. And we want to optimize digestion most of the time.
Yeah,
so
another added benefit of the intermittent fast, especially if you're taking that longer window, because like we've talked about before, that lack of having to digest any food just allows your system to relax and heal and be that much more optimized for your next meal.
Absolutely. Well, and there is also one disclaimer that I guess I want to give, or thing to point out here, is the busy people who are already not eating enough calories. Like, obviously that's not necessarily what this podcast is intended, or who this podcast is intended to target, but with the clients that I work with, tend to see a lot of those people, busy working moms who are already under eating. They have a fat loss goal. This is probably not the approach for you, because again, even though a caloric deficit is required for fat loss, if you're already under eating, that's a completely different thing. That's a different story.
Well, yeah, and that goes into more of like the overall like weekly routine of a person, because more often than not, you're going to have somebody they're going through periods of under eating, likely because there's also not a lot of activity involved, so they don't have their metabolism working the way that it should. And then you have that 1 or 2 off days where it's either out with the family or anything else, and you do have a very high calorie meal, and that just kind of resets your whole caloric deficit for the week. So yeah, that it all comes down to having the right, no matter what dieting paradigm you're following, you still need the right amount of nutrients coming in. Yes. The right calories, the right macros.
You still need to know the basics, is what I'm saying. You need to understand that you're giving your body what it needs to function. So again, if you are one of those people who's already super, super busy and you basically skip all of your meals anyway, if this isn't working for you, there's a lot of other reasons for that.
Right. Yeah. Just because you're skipping meals doesn't mean your body doesn't require the same nutrients.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, so all of that stuff still applies. Just because you start intermittent fasting doesn't mean macros and calories mean nothing. Yeah. It's still just as important.
Your body still needs fuel to function. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to make that disclaimer before we move on.
Yeah, so we love intermittent fasting for this setup. Now, as far as like components of the nutrition goes, this goes back to the things that you personally want to deal with But if we're talking specifically about saving time, then keeping your variety smaller is going to be in your best interest. So especially if you are preparing the food yourself, then you want to find a few different meals that you are comfortable with making for the majority of the week that you can just pull out and eat when you need them. Preparation ahead of time, meal prep ahead of time saves you so much time, it's not even funny. And if you can get over the idea of eating consistently the same foods, then your life just got that much simpler.
Absolutely. Well, and there are some ways to still spice up a few of the same meals. Obviously, you know, changing the seasonings that you're using or the preparation methods is a really easy way to not add any extra time to your prep, but to get some more flavors and to get some more variety. But you really, if you're trying to streamline your habits and your process, you are going to end up with, you know, the same meals consistently over and over. So again, that's something that at the beginning of these goals, you have to sit down and think about what level of variety are you okay with, you know, to kind of weigh out time spent versus like, you know, the variety in the meals that you want to eat.
Yeah. And think of your meals modularly in that you can take the same type of meal setup and change out the protein source, or you can change up the carb source and still keep the same type of meal identity, but the ingredients are a little bit different, but the ones that you're switching in or out contribute the same types of nutrients. So like potatoes, rice, oats, pastas, things of that nature are very easily interchangeable because they're predominantly carb sources. If you've got lean proteins, like a lean cut of steak or red meat, or you have lighter fish or chicken breast, things of that nature, all super lean proteins, pretty much interchangeable. And then fattier proteins are also fairly interchangeable. A little bit fattier cut of steak or ground beef, chicken thighs, salmon, all of these things that have the combination of proteins and fats. When you look at them from the overall nutrient perspective, you don't have to get super crazy with the meals that you're changing up. You just pull one of the ingredients, swap it for something else. And if you're picking 2 to 3, I'd say like 1 to 2 is definitely more in your best interest if we're saving time here. Different types of proteins or 1 to 2 different types of carbs or fat sources, and prep that out for the week. Then you can have any number of different mixtures of those foods to create different meals, to keep variety there. And then, like Alexa was saying, different seasonings within that, different toppings or sauces, as long as they're within your calorie constraints, can very easily change up the entire flavor of the meal without you doing a whole lot of extra work.
Absolutely. Like virtually no extra work, to be honest. So in reality, when we're talking about saving time, your time is better spent thinking about those things, thinking about how to easily swap certain things in and out and kind of having your plan set for the week than time spent on, you know, shopping, prepping, cooking. So, you know, I think it would be more worth it for you to sit down and like have a plan for the week and then cook those items very simply instead of trying to make all of these complicated recipes or, you know, trying out new recipes and things like that.
I think that's what overwhelms a lot of people. Is it like, all right, I'll look up some healthy recipes, and these are recipes with 15 different things, and they've got all these different
cook
times
50 different things.
And it's like, yeah, obviously that would completely wear you out. And if you're picking recipes that are half-hour to 2-hour prep times a piece, and you're trying to do that for a whole week, then
that sucks.
You're gonna spend way too much time. Whereas if you're taking a simple protein source, prepping out, whether you're doing the full week or you're splitting it up into 2 different meal preps, so you're just keeping things a little bit fresher. I mean, you can get a week's worth of food prepped in an hour and boxed up and ready to go. And yeah, you're going to have a little bit less variety, but if you're changing up the seasonings, changing up the toppings and things like that, you can very easily acquire different tastes, save a ton of time, completely remove your stress for the week. You're never going to get yourself into that point where it's like, I don't feel like cooking. What should I eat? Screw it, I'm going to order something. Now that we've got Uber Eats and DoorDash and everything else on demand, it's just that much easier. So yeah, having the food prepped ahead of time, doing things as simply as possible will save you so much time, so much headache, and you'll progress so much faster.
And honestly, I would say that also saves money. So if you
you
are
save a ton of
somebody
money,
that's trying to balance the whole time versus money situation, choosing those simple ingredients, a lot of those things that Kyle mentioned are all things that can be purchased in bulk. And they're all, they're fewer ingredients, right? So you're not having to go out to the store and buy 15 different items that you're only going to use a little bit of in one recipe.
Right.
So by, choosing those simple items and kind of mixing and matching, your grocery bill is actually going to be a lot lower anyway.
Yeah.
So if you are able to cook and prep and shop for your own things, if you are trying to save a little bit more money, that would be the way to do it.
Absolutely. And you'll save a lot more fridge space.
Yeah.
The stuff I buy hardly takes up any space in the fridge.
My stuff takes a lot of space in the fridge. I like to have a lot of sauces
we have
and toppings.
A lot of sauces.
And condiments.
Yeah.
Because I like more variety, okay? So that's what I do.
Yep. And yeah,
it works.
You definitely stick to it.
But so on the other side of things, for the people who really are prioritizing just time and time alone, this is a perfect opportunity for you to be able to outsource some of those tasks.
Absolutely.
To maybe have a grocery service, maybe do a meal prep service where someone else is either shopping for or prepping and cooking those meals for you, and then your only responsibility is to eat them.
Yeah.
So obviously that's coming at a higher price point, but for some people that's worth it, and that's, they have the means to do that.
Right. If you have the means and you want to save the time and you want really tasty foods that still conform to what you're trying to do, there are services out there that are really good at this.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to pay for it. And so that's the trade-off. But they are absolutely valuable if you have the means to do it, and that's the route that you want to go. Because a lot of these different meal prep services, they have consistently rotating menus. So you always will have variety. Yeah. You can just go in and say, I want X amount of this, X amount of that. They'll ship it to you. If you're not wanting to go that route and pay for everything completely prepped up front, then the amount of different grocery delivery services now where you don't have to go to the store and shop. You just click it up on your phone. Mm-hmm. They'll send it to you. Some do it the same day. Some do it a couple days later. And that's going to save a bunch of time right there. So
absolutely. Well, and there is one drawback. So because I do have a couple clients who use meal prep services to save mm-hmm. them a lot of time. But the one drawback is, if you're choosing a meal service that has kind of these pre-planned meals, and most of them do give you nutrition information, mm-hmm. it is still your responsibility to make sure that those meals loosely fit yes. your nutrition needs, because they're not always going to be perfect, and they're not going to be, not all those meals are going to fit together nicely within the same day. So it doesn't take out all of your time and effort. But again, your time can be spent, it takes 5 minutes to kind of see what meals are going to fit together and fit into your calorie needs right. for the day. But it is something that you have to think about and consider, because just because you ordered a meal and the ingredients and the quality is good doesn't mean that it's going to fit your fat loss program.
Right. Yeah. So the meals that you're picking out of that lineup obviously still need to conform to your macronutrient and calorie needs. And the idea should be that you get fairly close from those prepped meals, and then you fill in the gaps with mm-hmm.
different
things like a protein shake or a bar or just other little things through your day that are going to fill in those gaps. Because mm-hmm. you're never going to get a perfect... You might, but very rarely would you get a perfect
set. There are services
set.
That you could pay for, and then again, that would be another added cost.
Yeah,
there are meal prep services that will take orders based on your calorie or your macro
right.
needs. That's harder to find. Not every city has
right.
a service like that. I know that there are some that exist,
mm-hmm.
and it's something you could look for or potentially hire out somebody to do for you.
Right. So that would be the top tier
yeah.
custom meal prep. So that's yes. definitely top dollar. The one below that would be the places that do the rotating menu.
Mm-hmm.
Those are definitely the most common, and they'll give you the nutrition information. And then other places you can even order bulk prepped proteins or carbs or mm-hmm. things like that. So it just
that's
depends.
Really easy.
Yeah, those are really easy, and then you just combine them yourself,
put them together
heat
with
them
your
up,
portion sizes.
and you're good to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, all different ways of going about it. But again, you take all of that and then put that into an intermittent fasting style routine where you've only got to eat 8 hours out of the day or whatever you choose your window to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's so much time that you're saving, because now you're not even having to worry about the prep. The hour of prep per week is gone. and the additional hour of grocery shopping gone.
And the 10 to 20 to 30 minutes that you would spend eating that meal is gone.
Yeah.
Whatever it happens to be for you.
Yeah.
I think another thing to mention too is some of those like cooking based meal prep services like the Blue Apron and the Green Chef and things like that, because I think those are more accessible to more people. They come at a lower price point, and I know a lot of like moms who do it or families who do it so that they don't have to do all the additional like shop and prepping before actually cooking the meal. But again, that does come with the same drawbacks of just because those ingredients are all healthy or just because they're all fresh doesn't necessarily mean that it fits your nutrition needs. But a lot of those meals, because again, all the components come separately, it's really easy to adjust your portions of each of those ingredients as you're putting the meal together. So still doable, but you do still have to think about it. Like there's just this awareness piece that you have to have if you're going to use any of these, tools or tips. But that's still a really great way to save a little bit of time.
Healthy and fresh do not equal weight loss.
They don't.
Not even close.
They don't.
And so that's why no matter what paradigm you're following, you still need to know the underlying nutrients in what you're eating, because you can take the cleanest diet possible and just by changing serving size and quantities, go from a fat loss diet to a mass gain diet. It's it's easy.
Yeah, it's easy to do.
It's very easy to do. And that's very simple. So having those down, still making sure that you're planning your meals out around the nutrients is always going to be a factor. And that's why preparation ahead of time is something you can never avoid if you're serious about this.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think a lot of people have some misconceptions when they go into services like that or services like the services we offer, and they think that they just are going to pay someone and then they don't have to think about anything. And that's just not reality. You are still required to be like an active participant in your program, and you do have to put a little bit of thought and a little bit of effort into the process.
Yeah. Unless you've hired out a completely custom meal prep that's shipped to your door,
personal chef. Unless you hire a personal chef to come to your
macros,
house,
then you'll have to think about it.
And that's what I want for you. We want our clients to be involved and to learn how to do this on their own, so that you don't have to like hire someone or pay someone for the rest of your life. But I know that there are people out there who their time is the most important, and that's totally fine. So then you have to kind of look for that higher level of service where someone is actually there to do it all for you, because obviously we can't. I can't buy the food for you. I can't make it for you.
And that also goes back to the variety thing. And so if you find a setup of meals throughout your day that works for you, that conforms to your macros, and just consistently do the same thing, guess what? Then you're not thinking about it either.
Nope. It becomes second nature. Yeah. And so there is a little bit of a learning curve, right? There's a little bit of a short period of time where you do have to put a little extra time in, a little extra effort, and then it does get easier. So that's the other thing too, is don't get overwhelmed by, thinking that you want something that involves very, very little time, and then think that you're not going to have to put any effort into learning how to get there.
Right. Like
there is going to be that beginning phase where you do have to put a little bit more time and more effort in to get you to the point where you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, and more variety is more work every single time. So just know that going in. So those are all great tips to kind of follow to save as much time as possible. We touched on a little bit some of the negatives and things that you shouldn't do with like the meal frequency. So definitely eating 6 or more meals per day, very rigid time frames, probably not in your best interest if you're trying to save time. Are there any others that come to mind, things to not do with time being the primary objective of saving?
Yes. If we're thinking strictly about time, we know that plant-based diets, vegan, vegetarian diets can be some of the most time-consuming from a planning and preparation perspective. Yes, there are a lot of plant-based convenience options and things that you can use to fit certain calorie and macro goals. But the planning part, making sure that you have all of your, individual macros covered, and also having to consider some of the micros that you might be missing.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is extra time and extra effort. It's not impossible. It's just not the quickest way to go about it.
Right. No, if we're talking strictly from time savings, a vegetarian or vegan diet is the absolute worst route that you can go. Because now, instead of having the best, most nutrient-dense protein sources available to you that contain all 8 essential amino acids, they have tons of different minerals and vitamins in them. Now that we've removed all that, we have to go about our day making sure that not only are we hitting our protein intake, but we're doing it from enough varieties of plants that we're covering all 8 essential amino acids. We have to make sure, especially our B12, our iron, and other various micros are accounted for that would have easily been accounted for if you were eating any meat whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And so it just adds that extra layer of accounting that you need to do that a meat eater wouldn't necessarily have to do.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And when people are getting into a plant-based diet based on health reasons, and we've already kind of exhausted that topic, we've talked about it a lot.
It'll never die.
I know. Well, and I don't think that it's terrible. You know, I think that for people who are choosing a plant-based diet because it really will positively impact their health, that's a great thing for you. Or if you're choosing it for ethical reasons, that's a great thing too. But if we're talking strictly about time and you want to be as time efficient as possible, this is going to be the most difficult way to do that, mm-hmm. to do it. So I would reconsider, or you again have to go back to the time versus money debate. You would have to spend more money having somebody to plan these, plant-based mm-hmm. meals out for you and account for all of those things.
Yeah. And then have even less variety, because now there's way less options we have to achieve a lot of these different goals, mm-hmm. Especially protein intake always being the big one.
Yeah. Well, and I hate to tell plant-based people that like the quickest, easiest way is for them to just drink protein shakes all day, because from a health standpoint, that's not really super effective, and it's not fun. Yeah, it's not fun to do.
More often than not, if you are in a fat loss diet and you're trying to follow plant-based, you're going to need to rely on protein supplements, mm-hmm. Because it is very difficult unless you have such a great metabolism that you're able to elevate your carbs to, and your carb allowance is higher, which will allow you to get more protein in from plants and from non-meat-based sources and less reliant on supplements. You're going to have to supplement, because more often than not, any sort of vegetarian-based protein is going to come alongside
more carbs,
other carbs or other fats, which isn't necessarily the case with leaner animal proteins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking about different gaps that might need to be filled, back to this whole time situation, there are some things to consider if you don't have time to prioritize certain nutrients, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think probably the first thing that you should start with if you're looking to save time and streamline your habits is making sure that you've got a solid multivitamin, a solid fish oil, and even potentially like a greens powder or a fiber supplement.
Yeah.
If we're thinking that generally when people are trying to cut corners, they are cutting out, a lot of those vegetables or fruits or things like that. If people are really focused on prioritizing protein, prioritizing, fat sources and things like that to build the most nutrient dense diet. And again, veggies are very nutrient dense, but they do take a lot more time to prep. Mm-hmm. And it does take more time in planning. And to be honest, it's just not something that most people prioritize.
Right.
Which I would love for that not to be the case, but it is. That's reality. So I think for those people, again, it's worth it to maybe spend a little extra money on some high quality supplements, mm-hmm. and to at least, replace the nutrients that you would be missing from, not getting those veggies in. And then depending on what your carb sources look like, again, you might need a little bit extra fiber, you might not, but that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah. I mean, if you break down a diet into its most basic components, and we're talking about the things that you need from it, always prioritize protein because that's going to be your base for lean body mass and maintaining the muscle that you've got on your frame, especially as we're going through fat loss. And then beyond protein, you need the fats and the carbs purely for energy's sake. And then you need your micronutrients, which you can supplement with. So if you're just doing the absolute bare minimum, hit your protein first, incorporate the fats and the carbs for whatever energy balance you need to get you through your day and through your workouts while maintaining that deficit, and then supplement with a great multivitamin, fish oil, a greens powder. And really, I mean, even if you're just doing that and not having any other veggies through the day, you're going to be way better off than the vast majority of people. And then if you do add vegetables in, as you should, you're that much better.
Yeah. Well, and you know, generally on a fat loss program, veggies have an important role with bringing extra volume to help satisfy you and fill you up during a meal. But if we're talking about saving time by intermittent fasting and kind of squishing in your eating window, you might not actually need that extra volume, which is why I say that it's pretty easy for people to kind of leave that out if it's just going to have an additional time requirement. So if you aren't intermittent fasting, then, you know, veggies are a great thing to bring in some more volume and obviously coming in with nutrients too.
Yeah, no, I think those are great points. Anything else to add?
The last thing that I did want to say is, you know, it kind of mentioned it at the beginning, but a busy schedule typically comes with less sleep and more stress. And those are two things that work directly against your fat loss efforts, even if you are in a calorie deficit. I found this quote. This was by an author who wrote the book, I think it was written a couple years ago, Why We Sleep, which has got a lot of really good information on all of the, I don't know, the details of why sleep is so important and what it does for you and what's happening inside the body while you sleep. And his quote was, "The physical and mental impairments caused by one night of bad sleep dwarf those caused by an equivalent absence of food and exercise." So
interesting.
And I do think it's a really good point. I mean, recovery, and we've talked about this before, recovery is so crucial to any of your wellness related goals, and sleep is recovery. Stress management does help recovery. So without, you know, those two pieces being addressed or thought about, you might not make as much progress as you could if those were prioritized. So I know it's really easy to, you know, just try to get by on 3-4 hours of sleep, especially if you are busy. But I would generally say that you're probably getting more out of a good night's sleep than waking up at 3 a.m. to try and squeeze in a workout in your busy schedule.
Yeah, it goes back to priorities.
Yeah.
So if weight loss is a priority, you need to make
recovery a priority.
You need to make the lifestyle piece that important to your day. So having time for the meal preparation, having a regular set schedule that you're going to follow as far as when you're eating, what you're eating, when you're moving and exercising, and when you're sleeping. And they all are huge contributing factors to that end goal. Certain areas you're probably not going to be perfect in. Nobody's perfect in all of them because you're not paid to be a fitness athlete. That's not what you're doing. And so, yeah, you'll have to make sacrifices in certain instances. But doing the majority of things right consistently is where you'll see the results. And you've got to start with something that you can handle. Don't try to go overboard all at once because you're never going to stick to it. That's why I always try to implement plans slowly with very few food options first, just to build consistency, build a framework, and then add more stuff to it. Because you'll get much better at knowing how things fit together, what types of meals are interchangeable, and eventually be comfortable with swapping those out without much thought behind it because you'll know it all fits.
Yeah, it's a learning process. It's a learning process. You're not going to be perfect at first. But if you're trying to save time, I think these are all really good tips on how to start getting there.
Absolutely. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. If there's anything you'd like us to cover in the future, you can reach out to me at hypertrofit.com. You can reach out to Alexa at therootedrd.com, and we will see you guys again next week.
We'll see you guys next week.